Bloodborne, my first FromSoft experience. About a month ago, I started watching clips from some video games that are known for their boss fights. Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring. At the time, I had just finished God of War from 2018, which itself included a few boss fights. I experienced some tough battles throughout my God of War experience, and had a sudden desire to play something more difficult. I remembered a time when a friend of mine, walking to school back in 2011, suggested that I play Dark Souls instead of Batman Arkham Asylum. I shrugged it off because I wasn't interested in playing a difficult game, but for some reason that comment always stuck with me. I knew the reason that I didn't play Dark Souls was because it was difficult, and I guess at the time I just wanted to play games that I knew I wouldn't quit on. Because of that memory and my sudden desire to play difficult games, I began looking into Dark Souls again. This led me to discover other From Software titles, in a genre which had thus far evaded my attention, Souls-likes. I'd never played any FromSoft game, nor had I ever played a Souls-like before. This was all new to me, and the idea of dipping into this genre for the first time was exciting. I had compiled a list of games that I'd like to play, but I didn't really know which one I wanted to try first. I figured I can't start with the newer ones, like Elden Ring, because I would never want to play the older games if I did. It's like when you watch Avengers Endgame and then try to watch the first Avengers movie and you expect them to feel the same, and it just doesn't work that way. So ultimately, I decided to go with one of the older games first. I had a few options. Dark Souls 1, 2, or Bloodborne I figured would be the three best options. And after some serious thought, I decided that I wanted the experience to be as difficult as possible. I was never a fan of horror games, and to be honest, I was too scared to play them for, my entire childhood. Still don't play them very often today. I remember being scared of Luigi's Mansion as a kid. And so when I was evaluating the three games, you could clearly tell that Bloodborne was supposed to be the scariest of the three between Dark Souls 1, 2, and Bloodborne. So reluctantly, I decided that Bloodborne would be the first FromSoft game that I would play. The challenge that I was attempting to overcome was not only playing a difficult game, but also facing my fears. And I decided that I wasn't just going to play the game, but I was going to get the Platinum trophy on that thing. The road ahead was terrifying, difficult, frustrating, and most of all, transformative. This is my Bloodborne experience. Section 2, my experience playing the story 4 times. Unlike most people who work towards a Platinum on a 10-year-old game, I didn't use many Fuck you. I didn't use many tricks or I didn't use many tricks or I didn't use many tips or tricks to shorten the length of time it took to achieve the trophy. In fact, I didn't even consider creating a save at the end of the story so that I could revert to that save and play the second and then the third endings. I saw some other guys who did that, and I realized how smart it was, but I hadn't considered doing that myself. I was fully committed to the idea of playing the story 3 times at least, which in retrospect is kind of silly. I think the last time I did that was when I played Skyrim on the PS3. I used to make saves and revert to them whenever it got a little bit too difficult for me. But I haven't employed that strategy in a very long time. But perhaps I should have, because I ended up playing the entire story 4 separate times, each of which I did to achieve the unique endings. On my third playthrough, and this is why I had to do it 4 times, on the third playthrough I got a little too excited and I accidentally defeated Gehrman before I consumed the 3 umbilical cords, and I had them. They were in my inventory, I just didn't consume them before I fought him. That would have been the third and final ending that I needed, and I really wanted to get it too because that ending is considered the true ending, where you become an infant great one. Upon realizing this, I was shattered, and I wanted nothing to do with running through an entire 4th playthrough. I was hoping to use my 4th playthrough to finish the trophies for acquiring all the weapons and the hunter tools, but no. I had to do the entire thing all over again, and so I did. Every time I played through the story, the enemies were tougher, but so was I. Some enemies I didn't have much trouble with because I had already learned their weaknesses and their attack patterns, but other enemies like Gehrman only got harder to beat by my 3rd and 4th playthroughs. Truthfully, I enjoy the concept of the game's difficulty evolving alongside you because it forces you to remain on your toes. When a game becomes too easy, it isn't worth the effort to achieve the Platinum. So it's this concept that maintained my interest even throughout the 4th playthrough. But I gotta say, by the time I finished my Platinum journey, I was totally done with the game. I can't see myself ever playing it again unless the game is remastered. You could not pay me to fight the Thumerian descendant again. I don't care how much you offer. When I first started playing the game, I was interested in the story, but as I quickly learned, the story is fairly implied, not simply told. Hey, you bitch. To pick up the story, you have to play To pick up the story, you have to pay close attention to the details in the world around you and progress through the side quests that you may or may not even be aware that are taking place. Even having played the story 4 times, I can't say I totally get it. In order to understand, I'll need to watch those YouTubers who make Bloodborne lore videos if I want to speak on the lore. So admittedly, I'm not totally equipped to do that right now. To me, this is one downside to the Souls series. It's difficult to pick up on the lore, especially if you're simple-minded like me. At the same time, though, that's part of what makes them so unique and gives birth to such a great community who's trying to figure it all out together. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it. So from the individual perspective, I would have liked to pay more attention and picked up on the lore myself, but I am deeply grateful of... You are. But I'm deeply grateful for those of you who are willing to put in the hours of work to figure out the lore and explain it all. Thanks a ton for that. Part 3, how did I feel about the aesthetic and settings? As I mentioned before, generally I don't play horror games. I've always been intimidated by them, and I chose to play action games instead, like Call of Duty. When I first started considering playing FromSoft games, I had a list of games available to choose from, Bloodborne being the scariest of them from what I could tell. My interest in FromSoft games comes from my desire to overcome a difficult challenge, one that has a reputation for being difficult, in order to prove to myself that I could handle it. I ultimately decided on Bloodborne because I was a fucking bitch. I ultimately decided on Bloodborne because I was going after 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only was it a difficult game, but it's also considered part of the horror genre. I could face my fears against the toughest opponents in any game I've ever played, so that's what I decided to do. I decided to face my fears. And that part of the script sucks. Section 3, Part 2. The setting of the game is what I would consider to be unsettling, but fitting for the context in which the experience is supposed to be had. The setting is supposed to intimidate you, and it does. And it f***ing does. The setting is supposed to intimidate you, and it does so pretty easily. After a few playthroughs, I wasn't intimidated anymore for the most part, and I was able to absorb and enjoy the scenery around me, unlike my previous playthroughs. For the majority of the story, I enjoyed each of the locations that I had access to. Each location is worthy of exploration and offers a unique setting that maintains the eerie, creepy feeling that the game is centered around. Enemies are difficult in... Enemies are difficult in proportion to your progression for the most part, which keeps the game fun and engaging. And I would comfortably choose to do nothing. And I would comfortably choose to go back to certain locations to farm echoes, blood vials, or whatever I needed before fighting a certain boss. And once you get really good, you don't need to do that. So let's talk about the locations. Location number 1, Central Yharnam.
Poor you. Poor you.
It took me 5 fucking hours to figure out Central Yharnam. Honestly, it probably took me 3.5 hours just to get down the initial set of stairs and down the street where you run into all the townsfolk who are like worshipping some burning beast. It was an extremely frustrating experience for me. Although it's exactly what I needed to kind of get acclimated with the FromSoft style of game. Anyway, Central Yharnam is a perfect setting to get the player acclimated to the feel of the game. There are lots of NPCs to interact with by speaking with them through windows or knocking on doors.
I'm afraid I may not be of help for much longer. Save me.
It's the most lively place in the game outside of Cathedral Ward. The town feels very much alive and terrified as the beasts are taking over the streets. As a first-time Souls player, I struggled greatly, but Central Yharnam is where I first started to get good. So I will always remember it as my first Souls sandbox where I learned how to analyze the attack patterns of the Soulsborne enemies, as well as learning how to analyze the attack as well as the timing of various weapons and how to explore such a dangerous location. The scenery in Central Yharnam is arguably the most recognizable when people think about the game. And that likely has lots to do with the fact that it is the first location that you explore when you're introduced to the world of Bloodborne, though by the time you've completed your first playthrough, it becomes the easiest location to speedrun through, and you begin to take it for granted. But for your first playthrough, it truly dials in the gothic aesthetic perfectly, and it sets the tone for the rest of the game very well. I love Central Yharnam. In Central Yharnam, you have 2 bosses. Number 1, the Cleric Beast. Not a difficult boss, but very intimidating if you haven't already watched the fight on YouTube before you fight him. Gets the juices of success flowing when you beat him for the first time. Such a stupid line. The Cleric Beast is the first boss for many people who played this game, and because of his size and the amount of damage that he can do when he hits you, Really gets the dopamine flowing whenever you take him out for the first time. Second boss is Father Gascoigne, aka Papa G. He's a tough boss, but justifiably so. Defeating Papa G means that you get to go to Cathedral Ward, which makes him so much more significant. I actually fought Gascoigne before the Cleric Beast. I really wasn't ready for this caliber of opponent, but I didn't give up, and eventually I did beat him on maybe the 6th or 7th try. This means he was also my very first successful boss fight in any Souls game, so I may have to get a statue of him or something. The next location you go to is Cathedral Ward.
But if you spot anyone with their wits about them, tell them about this here Erden Chapel. They'll be safe here. The incense wards off the beasts.
Cathedral Ward is the most centralized location in the game. I say this because it connects to Central Yharnam, Old Yharnam, Hemwick Charnel Lane, Forbidden Woods, Upper Cathedral Ward, the abandoned Old Workshop, and it's not necessarily connected. However, you can be transported to 2 other disconnected locations by adversaries in Cathedral Ward. Amygdala will transport you to the Nightmare Frontier.
Oh, Amygdala, have mercy on the poor bastard.
And there's a snatcher just outside of the church. Is it a church? I don't know if it's a church, but there's a snatcher out there, and if he catches you, or kills you, he will transport you to Hypogean Gaul. Technically, there's only one boss fight in Cathedral Ward, and that would be Vicar Amelia. Whenever I look at other players' rankings of the most difficult bosses in the game, Vicar Amelia is usually somewhere near the top. I cannot say that I shared that experience, and that's because I was a wimp, and I used a cooperator every time I fought him, which made him very easy. 3 times. Cathedral Ward also has the most notable NPC interactions, outside of maybe Jura from Old Yharnam. Most of the NPC quest lines have to run through Cathedral Ward at one point or another, and it's probably because Cathedral Ward is such a centralized location. And visually, Cathedral Ward feels more positive than most of the game. Perhaps that's for good reason. It's essentially the central hub outside of the Hunter's Dream, and it's also the home of our best and only real friend in the entire game, the Odin Chapel Dweller, who only wants to help people. Although I kind of killed him once.
What?
I just wanted to help people.
Our third location is Old Yharnam. Old Yharnam is super eerie and very treacherous, full of monsters just like Central Yharnam, but somehow feels significantly more dead. Perhaps by the prominence of Jura shooting the Gatling gun at me while I was trying to explore during my first playthrough. His constant shooting was a reminder of the fact that he was there to protect the beasts from me. There were no NPCs to speak with outside of Jura. I never did befriend him, but knowing he was the only sane person in town made it very clear just how lonely it was in Old Yharnam. Side note, I did have the opportunity to befriend him once. I climbed to the top of the ladder and he started to approach me in a friendly manner, and instinctively I shot him with the blunderbuss. That didn't end well for me, and because of that, I squandered my one opportunity to be his friend. Old Yharnam is home to technically just one boss, the Blood-Starved Beast. I also sort of consider Jura to be a boss fight because he's really difficult to kill. That is, unless you use a YouTube tutorial that tells you to use the blunderbuss 4 times. I did do that, but several times before I figured that out, I tried to take him out by conventional methods, and that did not go well. So, in my mind, Jura is a boss. The Blood-Starved Beast was a difficult boss for me because I couldn't quite adapt to his use of poison, but once I understood that you could use things like the blood cocktail to lure him to a location where you could get a few swipes in, it was a little bit easier. And during my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th playthroughs, I made sure that I had enough antidotes with me, that the poison wasn't a major factor in the fight. So he did become a bit easier. Our next location is the Abandoned Old Workshop. Basically serves little purpose outside of lore. In the Abandoned Old Workshop, you can pick up a doll outfit, which can be sold for a hefty amount of blood echoes, so it's worth going there. And if you're trying to get the platinum, you can pick up one of the 4 umbilical cords in the game, and it's the easiest umbilical cord that you can get. So if you're trying to get the ending where you become an infant great one and you fight the moon presence, I highly recommend you visit the Abandoned Old Workshop.
What? What is this? I can't remember. Not a thing, only I feel. A yearning, something I never felt before. What's happening to me? Tell me, Hunter. Could this be joy?
Upper Cathedral Ward is not visually pleasing, not easy to navigate, and definitely not celestial enough for my liking. Upper Cathedral Ward is home to 2 bosses and a few items that you might need for the Platinum Trophy, so it is a required place for you to traverse. This destination may be one of the only that I feel were really a wasted opportunity. It's complicated and frustrating as hell to get to the Celestial Emissary boss fight, and once you get there, it isn't even that tough of a boss. I think it's more difficult just to get there than it is to actually beat him. And then jump through the window outside of the Celestial Emissary boss fight area to make your way over to Ebrietta's, the Daughter of the Cosmos boss fight. So unless you watched a YouTube video that told you that, you probably didn't figure it out on your own, unless you were just rolling for fun and accidentally busted through the window. Ebrietta's, the Daughter of the Cosmos, is a pretty unique looking boss, and I genuinely enjoyed the fight against her. But the Upper Cathedral Ward aesthetic should definitely have been more alien themed. You basically have to fight 2 giant aliens, but the entire place maintains the aesthetic of classic London, England. I think it would have worked out a lot better if the majority of the enemies in Upper Cathedral Ward were those little blue alien dudes, and if there were more signs that they were inhabiting this particular part of Cathedral Ward. For example, maybe some blue alien goo on the walls or something. Circling back around to the bosses, the Celestial Emissary I was most excited for because he's an alien and I love aliens. So he was super cool, but not hard enough. And he probably didn't need to start off masquerading as a small alien before shapeshifting into his actual size. And then for Ebrietta's, the Daughter of the Cosmos, again, visually she's very unique, but you don't get a great chance to look at her during the fight because she's so sizable. It wasn't until I recently looked at images of Ebrietta's on Google that I saw her face. So I guess maybe if the fight didn't require you to stand behind or directly beside her the entire time, I could have more appropriately appreciated her design. Still, pretty decent fight for an optional boss. Next, we're going to Hemwick Charnel Lane. Hemwick Charnel Lane has a very unique feel to it, almost like you can find a secret door to Halloween Town somewhere. Given its unique feeling and the prominence of witches, I have to say it was refreshing, and it made for a good farming location as well. Lots of echoes to be gathered there. Hemwick Charnel Lane is technically home to 1 boss, the Witch of Hemwick. The Witch of Hemwick boss fight was not a great way to pay tribute to the unique feeling that Hemwick Charnel Lane provided in my journey. However, it was kind of a nice change of pace during my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th playthroughs. If you want to get to Canehurst Castle and fight Martyr Logarius, then you have to take care of the witch first. That kind of blows. In terms of the Platinum journey, if you didn't get to Martyr Logarius on your first playthrough, then the witch becomes a required boss for a 2nd playthrough. In my case, she was required every time because I kept forgetting to pick things up at Canehurst Castle, which I needed to complete the Platinum. Speaking of Canehurst, everybody loves the snow. There are a very unique set of adversaries here at Canehurst Castle. They range in toughness, difficulty to defeat, which is kind of the same thing, tendency to gang up on you all at once, and the types of enemies you find at Canehurst Castle you will only find at Canehurst Castle. The requirements to get to Canehurst surely gave me a headache, but once I actually got there, I thoroughly enjoyed my stay. I love the snow, and the scenery here was magical in ways that the rest of the settings within the game just aren't. I compare my visit to Canehurst Castle to that of comedic relief in a scary movie. You have all these dark and gloomy settings, and then suddenly you're in a magical winter wonderland. You will still be punished here, but the punishment at Canehurst Castle is all the more enjoyable as long as the snow is falling. You'll find a single boss at Canehurst Castle, Mr. Martyr Logarius. Because of his fighting style, Martyr Logarius was my 2nd favorite boss fight in the game. Very tough at first, and not a modest run back for sure, but once I beat him, I felt like I just won a championship. I only wish that I had known that I was supposed to put his crown on and go talk to that lady in the castle. Because I didn't do that, I had to go back and fight him again if I wanted to get the Platinum. It was totally worth it, but it also sucked. Next up is the lecture building. I want to talk about both floors of the lecture building because there's really no use in separating them. It's a very unique setting with unique enemies and a unique NPC, Spider-Man. But not that Spider-Man, this Spider-Man.
We're fast friends by now.
The lecture building is one of my favorite settings in the game for sure. The enemies in the lecture building are slow but powerful in their own way. If you're not careful in one of the classrooms, then the globby student things will catch you off guard, but they're definitely worth a visit or 2 or 3 to farm a bunch of blood echoes if you need to level up or strengthen a weapon. You won't find any bosses here, but you do gain access to the Nightmare Frontier on the first floor and the Nightmare of Mensis on the second floor later in the game. Speaking of the Nightmare Frontier, not my favorite place, and the only purpose that it serves is you get access to Amygdala, one of the most difficult boss fights in my opinion. In order to get to Amygdala, you're required to travel all around the Nightmare Frontier. Once you get to the very end, and I mean the very end, you'll get access to a shortcut that makes the Nightmare Frontier not suck as bad. Which, by the way, on your way to that shortcut, if you're not careful, you'll get your first death by frenzy. Also, you will be raided by an online player if you're playing online. Then, once you get done with that whole thing, you'll have to take down 2 decently tough hunters before you can actually begin to explore. They are NPC hunters, so they are vulnerable in a way that the online raid is not. So they're slightly easier, but still, they might catch you off guard if you're just running around. Once you've taken down Amygdala, you will never return to the Nightmare Frontier for any purpose, as you can more efficiently farm for resources in other areas of the game. This makes the Nightmare Frontier's significance entirely dependent on the living Amygdala. Next we have the Forbidden Woods. The Forbidden Woods is almost like 2 separate locations. The first of which is very farmable, but if you make a mistake, you're in for some trouble. It takes a while to navigate through the first part of the Forbidden Woods, but eventually you make your way to the second half, which is absolutely littered with poisonous snakes and giant hogs, plus some random alien dudes. I still don't know why there are aliens in the Forbidden Woods, but maybe a lore deep dive will fill me in on that. At first, I didn't like the Forbidden Woods. It was too treacherous for my liking, but once I took it slow and found the best path to the Shadows of Yharnam boss fight, it didn't bother me that much, and I actually began farming resources there regularly. There are a few redeeming qualities about the Forbidden Woods. There's an NPC interaction with the beggar.
Whoa! Blimey, don't scare me like that. On a night like this, I took you for a monster.
Who is secretly a very powerful beast. So don't attack him unless you want to feel deep regret. You also have the ability to join the League Covenant.
The League exists to expunge all vermin, ridding us of any trace of human corruption.
And the ability to compete with other members of the League. Another one of the redeeming qualities here is the community culture of cooperation notes on the ground. These community notes clearly tell us that even though we take pride in achieving greatness alone, sometimes you need a friend to get through the tough times. More specifically, I'm talking about the boss fight of the Shadows of Yharnam. Right outside of that boss fight, you'll find notes all over the ground that say things like, remember cooperation, things like that. I think it's the only place in the game that I saw notes like that, and so to me that has cultural significance. That is the community acknowledging that sometimes you need a friend. And also, not to mention, you have a shortcut to Yosefka's clinic, where you can pick up the 2nd umbilical cord. Side note, I would recommend that when you first go through Yosefka's clinic, there will be a lady who tells you to leave her alone. Do it. Leave her alone.
Ah, moonlit scents. How did you worm your way in here? Well, I won't make any excuses. Would you mind leaving us alone? But if you refuse to leave... Oh well. I've always wanted to try my hand on a hunter.
Come back later. When you come back later, she'll be sitting on a table waiting for you to just... But your first time there, she's pretty freaking tough. So, hey, it's up to you if you want to fight her, but probably I would recommend you just go back later. She won't fight back the second time. There are lots of farmable enemies in the Forbidden Woods, but the Forbidden Woods is also very vast. And if you don't happen to beat the Shadows of Yharnam on your first time through, spoiler, you won't. Then your run back is going to suck hard. That is, if you didn't happen to unlock the shortcut. So have fun with that. The Forbidden Woods is home to only one boss fight. the Shadows of Yharnam. As mentioned before, uniquely, you find lots of notes on the ground from other players suggesting and encouraging cooperation with other players. Fortunately, there are enough people still playing the game online that this can be done with enough patience. Basically, you're going to ring the beckoning bell and wait for like 30 minutes for somebody to show up. Do make sure that your network settings are set to worldwide. If your settings are set to local, the likelihood that somebody is playing locally, very slim. On my first playthrough, I did not have enough patience, and I ended up beating them by myself, shockingly. And honestly, it felt really good when I won that boss fight by myself. It's a very rewarding experience and made even better by the fact that beating them also meant getting the hell out of the Forbidden Woods. Next up, we have Byrgenwerth. Not my favorite place. Byrgenwerth is small. Enemies vary greatly in their difficulty level, but every enemy at Byrgenwerth is pretty freaking tough. Byrgenwerth is also not large enough to provide any notable scenery outside of I would call it an ocean, but it's really a lake. The only notable thing at Byrgenwerth, outside of a pale blood hunter fight, is Mr. Master Willem, who speaks gibberish only. Killing him yields a reward, but you won't see him again until your next playthrough. Also, technically there are no bosses at Byrgenwerth, but this is where you gain access to Rom the Vacuous Spider. Next, we're going to talk about Hypogean Gaul. I fucking hated it. At no time did I enjoy Hypogean Gaul. I don't really see the utility in having 3 random tough hunters waiting to destroy you on the first floor of the prison, nor do I see much purpose for the 2 snatchers who deplete your health almost entirely before you get to the Dark Beast Parl fight. That is, unless you just run right past them. In fact, the only good thing I have to say about Hypogean Gaul is that the NPC interaction with Adela is nice for a change.
By your garb, the healing church, you've come to save me. Oh, thank you, dear saint. I have no words to express my relief.
She's one of the few NPCs that you can speak face-to-face with in the game, and to find her in a place so depraved as Hypogean Gaul was a nice touch. I just wish she didn't turn into a psycho later in the game.
Oh, kind hunter. The old girl you sent over, she's dead. Killed, stone dead.
Technically, Hypogean Gaul is home to a boss fight, Dark Beast Parl. You have to go through Hypogean Gaul to get there. And I'm going to be honest, Dark Beast Parl was the only redeeming quality about this part of the game. He's one of my favorite boss fights for several reasons. And once you beat him, you get a shortcut to Old Yharnam. Not that you need it at that stage of the game, but it's still nice. Next, we're going to talk about another location that I hate with all of my soul. That is Yargul, the Unseen Village. It's extremely difficult to navigate due to the variety and the volume of threats. They're a lot more aggressive here, and they respawn. Because the enemies are a lot more aggressive here, it's difficult to explore, which kind of makes you rush through the entire area just to stay alive. Because of that, it's extremely easy to miss the scenery. And there's not much else to say. It primarily serves as a reminder that the game is supposed to be hard, even if you've gotten good at this point. Next up, the Nightmare of Mensis / Murgo's Loft. It's a very unique and large setting here. Also potentially the most frustrating when you're trying to get things done that are needed for the Platinum. Frenzy is its most prominent at the Nightmare of Mensis and Murgo's Loft, especially when you first enter the Nightmare of Mensis, all the way up until you have unlocked the lantern at Murgo's Loft base. I'm looping these 2 locations together because there isn't much to the Nightmare of Mensis outside of it being an obstacle, making your journey to Murgo's Loft a massive headache. The experience mirrors that of a boss runback. You're essentially forced to sprint through the entire location, and you will not return for any reason once you've done 2 things. Number 1, light the lantern at the base of Murgo's Loft. And number 2, unlock the elevator that takes you to the middle of Murgo's Loft. Once you've done those 2 things, you will never, ever, ever go back, because it serves no purpose. The base at Murgo's Loft includes 2 potentially threatening encounters, a ton of spiders, and a random hunter who appears to be a follower of Mikolash, the host of the nightmare. Once you've gotten past them, the rest of Murgo's Loft is more accessible, and you don't have to deal with Frenzy again unless you need to acquire the Choir Bell. If you've yet to acquire the Choir Bell, you will definitely be dealing with Frenzy yet again. Within Murgo's Loft, you have 2 bosses, Mikolash, the host of the nightmare, that guy, and Murgo's wet nurse. This location is understandably difficult because it is technically where you slay the nightmare. First, you kill Mikolash. Then you take out the wet nurse. Without his wet nurse, Murgo cannot survive. Once the nightmare is finally slain, you can head back to the nightmare's dream and experience one of the 3 endings, considering you've done all the things you have to do in order to achieve those particular endings. Given its importance to the story, I kind of understand why the Nightmare of Mensis and Murgo's Loft is so treacherous and sizable. I think the boss fight with Mikolash could have been much better to serve his importance to the story. However, the fight with Murgo's wet nurse was properly intimidating for its importance to the story, though admittedly could have been more difficult in order to drive home the fact that it was the final boss preserving the nightmare. And finally, the location that you're all wondering why I haven't spoken about yet, the Hunter's Dream. Technically speaking, the Hunter's Dream is the central location of the game. It's not a bad location, but not great either. It's a safe place with decent scenery. It just sort of feels like an innovation on the pause button. In most games, you hit the pause button and you're able to make changes like leveling and upgrading your weaponry. But in Bloodborne, you just do it at the Hunter's Dream. Technically, you are in a very interactive pause menu with access to upgrade weaponry, fast travel to various locations, buy and sell resources, and jump into chalice dungeons if you feel so inclined. Which sounds a lot like a traditional pause button. Also, very interesting for a pause menu, there are 2 bosses here. Gehrman, the first hunter, and the Moon Presence. Those are also the last 2 bosses of the game for the 3rd ending. So it's a great place to stop and mention that this is where you should make sure that you consume all 3 umbilical cords before you fight Gehrman. Unfortunately, on my 3rd playthrough, having experienced the first 2 endings already, I accidentally defeated Gehrman before consuming the umbilical cords. I only realized it when the Moon Presence didn't react differently when it snatched me up after the Gehrman fight. This mistake cost me an entire playthrough and I had to play the game all over again for a 4th time.
Are you cold? Oh, good hunter.
Next, I want to talk about the bosses. I'm going to rank them by difficulty without going into detail. And we're going to be talking about all of the bosses that you have to defeat for the Platinum. This does not include the bosses that you have to beat in the Chalice dungeons prior to Queen Yharnam. They're kind of irrelevant and you can skip over them, which I didn't learn until later. You'll hear about that in a minute. Anyway, ranking by difficulty. We'll start least difficult to most difficult. There are 20 bosses that you have to defeat in order to get the Platinum. The easiest of which, at number 20, was the One Reborn. He's too big for his own good. At number 19, we have the Witch of Hemwick. I struggled on my first playthrough, but every other playthrough after that is, basically a pit stop. At number 18, very disappointing, is the Celestial Emissary. At number 17, the Cleric Beast. Understandably easy. He's the first boss that most people will fight and is supposed to be introductory to the combat system. At number 16, also extremely disappointing, the Moon Presence. The final boss that I beat in order to complete the Platinum journey. At number 15, we have what a lot of people will consider to be an offensive ranking, Vicar Amelia. Unless you decided to fight Vicar Amelia without help, it's an extremely easy boss fight. I used help every time, so do with that information what you will. At number 14, we have Yharnam, the Thumerian Queen. I also used help to defeat Yharnam. At number 13, we have Dark Beast Parl. At number 12, Ebrietta's, damn it. At number 12, Ebrietta's, the Daughter of the Cosmos. At number 11, perhaps a disappointing ranking, considering it is the last boss for the Nightmare Preservation, is Murgo's Wet Nurse. At number 10, Blood-Starved Beast. Admittedly a tough boss the first time you encounter BSB, but every time you fight Blood-Starved Beast after that is a lot easier. At number 9, Mikolash, Host of the Nightmare. Talk about a rhythm fight. At number 8, Shadows of Yharnam. They can be kind of difficult if you don't have a cooperator. But also, once you figure out who to take out first, second, and then third, becomes a lot simpler. At number 7, we have Father Gascoigne. I might be a little biased on this one because when I fought Father Gascoigne, he was my first boss, and also I wasn't ready for that. So he sits at 7 for me. At number 6, the Bloodletting Beast. I attempted several times to fight the Bloodletting Beast by myself, and that did not work out for me. So eventually I had to get some cooperators. Became a lot easier at that point. At number 5, Rom the Vacuous Spider. F that guy. At number 4, Amygdala. That might be surprising for some people, but his second phase where he starts using his own limbs as weapons is pretty complicated. And I don't think anybody will be surprised about the top 3. At number 3 is Martyr Logarius. Very reminiscent of a hunter style fight. At number 2, Gehrman, the first hunter. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. And also at number 1, my least favorite, most frustrating fight, and I did not feel much reward for defeating him, to be honest, was the Thumerian Descendant. I did this with no cooperators, and it took me 19 of my 20 blood vials. And it took me roughly 4 minutes. Maybe 4.5 or 5 minutes. I never really caught on to parrying, so I didn't have any way to make this any easier. I don't think I even staggered him once. And I've uploaded the Thumerian Descendant fight that I did, so if you want to see it, and you want to know the struggle, and check it out. Let me know how you feel about the rankings. I'm pretty sure there will be some agreements and disagreements, and also some name calling because I kept using cooperators for Vicar Amelia. Now that you're all feeling shock and awe about my rankings, we're going to talk about my favorite boss fights and why. This time we're going to go from favorite down to least favorite out of my top 5. Number 1 is Gehrman. Even though he's tough, I enjoyed this fight due to the pacing. And due to my lack of parrying skill, this fight required me to balance dodging and striking while maintaining my stamina. This made for a difficult but very rewarding experience. The first and second times that I fought Gehrman, I did well because the other enemies forced the development of my dodging skills. However, the third time around, I struggled greatly with his second phase. This forced me... What the f***? does that mean? This forced me to become more aggressive in order to ensure that I was landing strikes. My third time beating Gehrman was probably my favorite victory throughout the entire experience, and it also meant that I was finally ready to earn the Platinum Trophy as well for acquiring the third and final ending. And to be honest with you, that's probably what made me enjoy this fight more than any other. The fact that I knew I was only one boss fight away from getting the Platinum. My second favorite boss fight was Martyr Logarius. This fight is fast-paced and intense, but I learned his moves after a few attempts. He does a lot of damage at a distance, but the chimneys are very useful for protection as you recover or move in closer to attack. The intensity, the size of the opponent, his stature as a kingly figure, and the snowy setting were all perfect in my mind. This fight can be frustrating, but once you figured it out, feels great, especially because you're in the snow, and once you've taken down the king, you can put on his crown. Not to mention, when you do put on the crown, you unlock a new area where you can go speak with the queen. My third favorite fight was the Shadows of Yharnam. My first couple of times fighting the Shadows of Yharnam, I was trying to fight the striker with the sword first, while also trying to dodge the flames that are being thrown at me from across the arena. But that was a fatal mistake every single time. And eventually I tried taking out the long distance threats first, which makes the other two enemies a lot more manageable, and so that became my prevailing strategy. In the end, I ended up defeating the Shadows of Yharnam 4 times, once in each of my playthroughs. 2 of those times I had a helper, and 2 of those times I did it by myself. Once I found out that I could do it by myself, I preferred to do it solo. And once you figure out who to take out first, and you focus your energy on one enemy at a time, it makes the fight a lot simpler, and being able to take out 3 bosses on your own feels awesome. My fourth favorite fight was Dark Beast Parl. That might be shocking to some. Dark Beast Parl is not a very difficult boss, to be honest. I did fight him with a helper almost every time, but that's because I didn't really fight him for the challenge. He is an optional boss, and every time I chose to fight him, it was just because he gives you a lot of echoes. And it also unlocks the shortcut from Hypogean to Old Yharnam, which gets me a quicker route to the Blood-Starved Beast, which I already took out at that point, so it didn't really matter. The reason I enjoyed Dark Beast Parl so much is that he's visually pleasing. I also love that the arena is wide open and that he's covered with electricity. It almost feels like you're fighting the god of all thunderstorms. His design is very unique and just fun to look at. Most other bosses in the game are pretty depressing to look at, so Dark Beast Parl was a refreshing change of scenery, and he doesn't make you rip your hair out because he's decently easy to handle. In other words, he's just fun and maybe even relaxing to fight when compared to the other bosses. My fifth favorite fight in the game was Father Gascoigne. Father Gascoigne was the first boss that I had ever defeated in a Souls game. Did I mention Bloodborne is my first Souls experience? He was tough as hell, but that made defeating him that much more pleasing. I love fighting against bosses that have a hunter style of fighting. The pacing demands your undivided attention and quick decision making, which does increase the feeling of stress, but that's also why it feels so awesome to topple these bosses. The amount of weight that drops off your shoulders when you defeat a boss like this is unmatched. In particular, Gascoigne was more frustrating than other bosses because of the gravestones that you're continuously getting stuck on while trying to dodge him, whether that's bullets during his first phase or his relentless attacks during his second phase. For me, since I never figured out how to parry, I instead learned where the gravestones were and had to make sure that I wasn't running into them while running away from Gascoigne in either phase. And somehow I was able to beat him with this strategy, and the challenge of defeating him so early on in the story makes him a top 5 fight for me. Next up, we're going to talk about my 5 least favorite boss fights. At number 5, we have the Celestial Emissary. Here's the deal, guys. I love aliens. I love space. And because of this, I was really looking forward to this boss fight. And honestly, I do enjoy those little blue alien guys that fight along the Celestial Emissary. However, the problem is that this boss required no strategy. I only learned 2 things from this boss. For one, he starts off in the disguise of one of the smaller aliens, and it's pretty easy to figure out which one he is. And also, once he grows larger in his second phase, you just want to avoid getting stomped on because he reacts pretty quickly. But otherwise, the Celestial Emissary was an extremely easy boss fight for me. I am happy to have had the chance to fight an alien boss fight in Bloodborne, but I definitely wanted more out of it for sure. I'd say the Celestial Emissary's difficulty didn't pay proper tribute to the awesome idea of an alien boss fight. Every other alien I have ever seen in movies and video games is more of a threat than the Celestial Emissary. He comes in peace. At number 4, the Moon Presence. The Moon Presence is also a visually pleasing boss. He's very cool, and I was really looking forward to an epic fight against him. I had this idea that I would only fight this boss on the PS5 to make sure that the footage that I had was of the highest possible quality. However, I decided I wanted to show my wife what he looked like right before I was getting the Platinum trophy. So I walked into the arena ready to go, and I honestly did not intend to beat the Moon Presence. All I wanted to do was fight him one time so that she could see, and in fact, I hardly tried at all. I didn't use any Quicksilver bullets or blood vials. I was nearly dead, and I was counting on it actually. But once I realized I was only a few slashes away from my Platinum trophy, I just figured I would finish him off. If he happened to catch me off guard and beat me, then I would go ahead and switch over to the PS5. But unfortunately, he didn't catch me slipping at all. I won the fight with minimal effort, and that might be because the previous bosses had prepared me mentally for a lesser opponent, as he surely turned out to be. But I was hoping for a more memorable experience in my fight against the Moon Presence. It's still a great experience, and my beating this opponent resulted in my earning of the Platinum trophy, but I wanted a tougher fight to end my Bloodborne experience. I'm very sad to say that this clearly was not the boss that I was expecting. My third least favorite boss fight in the game was Mikolash, the Host of the Nightmare. Mikolash is not a difficult boss, but he does do a ton of damage in your third and fourth playthroughs. Just like Rom, except his timing is a little bit more difficult to pinpoint. If you mess up your timing even one time, he might catch you with his auger twice in a row, and you're screwed. Or if you're fighting him in his second phase and he has enough time to throw those stars at you, that ends up being a one-hit kill. Up until I figured out the timing of his auger strikes in the first phase, and that you have to stay up and close and very aggressive in the second phase, I was getting very frustrated. Even once I figured it all out, I still managed to screw up in my timing. In my fourth playthrough, I think I had to fight Mikolash 8 times before I finally took him out. I might have just been too mentally burned out at the time from essentially speedrunning the game, but the struggle was fucking real, and I am very happy to say that I'll never have to fight him again. So why did I say he's not a difficult boss and then complain about all the struggle that I had? Very simple answer. Mikolash is a true rhythm fight. Once you've picked up on his rhythm, you can win the fight without basically taking a single hit. My second least favorite fight was Rom the Vacuous Spider. Rom is a well-known boss for some unknown reason. I truly don't understand why everybody talks about Rom, but here I am doing it too. The first time I fought Rom, there was nothing to it. In fact, it was quite easy. In New Game Plus, same deal. I didn't struggle too much at all. But just like Mikolash, in my third and fourth playthroughs, it was a totally different story. Maybe the issue was that I had leveled up my HP so much that I could withstand Rom's attacks without taking much damage in my first and second playthroughs. But in my third and fourth playthroughs, Rom's attacks were a lot more damaging. I had to develop a really strange strategy to make sure that I could take out Rom, which was basically that I had to make sure that during Rom's second phase, I was constantly running in large circles to avoid the crystals that he throws at you. Every now and then I would have the spiderlings gathered on one side of Rom so I could run directly at him and throw in a few slashes. After I got a couple hits in, I would have to bail and start all over again. I basically had to employ that strategy during the second phase up until I finally whittled his health down enough to beat him. But if I slipped up and got caught in some of those airborne crystals, I was toast. It never felt very rewarding to beat Rom either, aside from the fact that I didn't have to run in any more circles. So needless to say, I was happy to be done with Rom after my fourth playthrough. That's for damn sure. And now for the most difficult and also my least favorite boss fight in the entire game, the Pthumerian Descendant. I don't have much good to say about this boss. The fight would have been great if the arena didn't suck so bad. First of all, you have to fight him in the Chalice dungeons, and his particular dungeon is one of the more difficult dungeons I fought through. The enemies in this dungeon are strong and can deplete your resources before you can even get to him, so it's a very tedious process of being careful and tiptoeing your way all the way up until the door that gets you to the Pthumerian Descendant. However, that's to be expected because the trophy that you earn once you've completed this Chalice dungeon is the second rarest trophy in the game, the one you earn for defeating the level 3 boss, Queen Yarnum. The Pthumerian Descendant fights relentlessly and has a difficult attack pattern to counter without parrying skill. As mentioned before, I never figured out parrying, so in my fight that I actually beat the Pthumerian Descendant, I burned through 19 of my 20 blood vials, and I burned through all 20 of my Quicksilver bullets. I had to run away most of the time, and when I was in control of something, it was only the part of the arena that we were fighting in. Generally speaking, I had to fight like Floyd Mayweather against this dude. I was running all fight long, only occasionally striking when I saw a brief opening to do so. Eventually I picked him apart and was able to win, but that's all thanks to the fact that I did have 19 blood vials in my pocket. If the limit were any lower than 20, I would probably still be fighting this fucker today. The most difficult parts of pursuing the Platinum Trophy. Chalice Dungeons. Chalice Dungeons are easily the least enjoyable part about this game. I played in Chalice Dungeons for something like 12 or 14 hours before I found out that you could just skip them. There's a freaking YouTube video that'll tell you the code that you have to put in, and as long as you have the resources to put down the chalice, you can get to Queen Yarnum's dungeon. You still have to be pretty well experienced in the game and leveled up in order to work your way through the Chalice Dungeon where Queen Yarnum is, but if I hadn't figured out how to skip, I may have had something like 5 more hours of Chalice Dungeons to play through before I even got to Yarnum's dungeon. And once you get there, standing in your way is what I consider to be the hardest boss in the freaking game, the Pthumerian Descendant. Not to mention, he's the first boss out of 3 that you have to defeat before you get the trophy. The one for defeating Yarnum. And he's absolutely ruthless. After defeating the Pthumerian Descendant, I was able to get some cooperation from online players for my second boss, the Bloodletting Beast, and also the final boss, Queen Yarnum herself. So in a way, I had it far easier than a lot of guys who earned the Platinum for Bloodborne. I was lucky that there were players online after 10 years who could help me defeat the Bloodletting Beast and Queen Yarnum. And when we beat Queen Yarnum, we all celebrated. The next most frustrating part is collecting all of the hunter's weapons and hunter's tools. This is your typical tedious trophy, which is an experience that you have in just about any game that you try to get the platinum for. The 2 trophies, one for the weapons and one for the tools, aren't difficult actually. At worst, they are boring and tedious, like I mentioned, but by my 4th playthrough, I had already acquired most of the tools and the weapons. So I didn't have all that much work to do, but I would estimate it took me somewhere around 8 hours of time accumulatively to complete both of these once I was fully focused on them during my 4th playthrough. That's still 8 hours of time that I wish I would have been having fun instead of mind-numbingly running through the game to gather things I happened to miss during my 3 previous playthroughs. So I guess the most challenging part about this was actually overcoming my desire to give up, because at this stage I wasn't having fun anymore. I think at this point I was somewhere between 85 and 90 hours into the game, and I had seen it all a couple times already. I was pretty much ready to be done, but if I really wanted to get the platinum, I just had to keep going. And finally, was the Platinum Trophy worth the effort? In my mind, I made the right decision when I decided to Platinum Bloodborne. I was intimidated by it at first, and I couldn't even conceptualize the idea of achieving the Platinum Trophy in my first 6 or so hours that it took me just to get out of the first area of the game, which was Central Yarnum. But now that I've gone through all of the growing pains and I've achieved the Platinum, I can actually say that I'm a more skilled gamer for having done so. And I fucking hate calling myself a gamer, by the way. So just pretend I didn't say that. I'm a grown man, damn it. I've never played a game that was actually difficult like this before. The most difficult experience I'd probably had in gaming before this was playing Call of Duty multiplayer. And that's just because there's always somebody who's better than you, even if you play for 15 years like I did. So to set my sights on a goal so ambitious and outside of the norm for me, my real goal in all of this was to get good. And I think I have officially done that, at least in the world of Bloodborne. This journey was all about learning and adapting to a type of experience I'd never had before, and I wasn't even sure that I could handle. I learned, I adapted, and I handled it. And I have a Platinum Trophy on the most difficult game that I've ever played to show for it. And to give you an idea of just how difficult this was for me, my only other Platinum Trophies are for Saints Row the Third and SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. So as you can tell, this is a world of difference for me. Given the achievement, I now know that I can handle working on the Platinum Trophies for others FromSoft titles, and I think that's exactly what I aim to do. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to share your feedback in the comments and leave me a like. I worked very hard to make sure this didn't go from suck to blow.
Sanders, what's going on? It's Megamaid. She's gone from suck to blow. What?
And by the way, subscribe if you want to be notified of my next Platinum FromSoft adventure, Dark Souls Remastered. I fucking hate that game. Until next time, may the good blood guide your way. Scoob out.